So many of us watch horror films knowing we're going to be too scared to get out of bed that night. The thrill of watching a good horror film that can instill the fear of the unknown and darkness within us is incredible. In fact, horror is not even a new form of storytelling. It's as old as storytelling itself, spanning folk tales to cinema. Is there something primal within us that this genre appeals to? Horror films started almost immediately after the advent of cinema. The first horror film is believed to be The House of the Devil by George Méliès, made in 1896. While this film is not particularly scary, it is certainly the first to involve supernatural elements such as animated skeletons, ghosts, and the incarnation of the devil. After this, there were about 2 decades when a lot of horror films were getting made. Between 1900 and 1920, filmmakers started experimenting with this genre. As they did so, they looked to literary works to adapt for the big screen. The first adaptation of Frankenstein was released by Edison Studios, the production house started by the well-known American inventor Thomas Edison. During this period, we also saw an adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, based on the novel of the same name by R.L. Stevenson in 1913, and a film called The Werewolf, both of which are now sadly lost. The period between 1920 and 1930 saw the release of many classics of the genre, and it can be split based on whether these films have sound or not. Some of the best-known silent films of this period are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, the latter being a title that has received a lot of fame recently. Once technological progress was made within the craft of cinema, we saw some wonderful films. Many of them were iterations of the films that had released in the early years of horror films, like Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and The Mummy. In fact, this specific iteration of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was the first color version of this story. The 30s were also the period when the word horror began to be used for this genre. Before this, these films were just seen as romance films with dark elements. This period also saw actors and actresses becoming stars off the back of these films, with one of the most notable names being Bela Lugosi. This was a period of heavy censorship, as public outcry accompanied every film's release. And while one may choose not to classify Freaks as a horror film, the public seemed to associate it with the genre, and it made people so uncomfortable that it received massive cuts in the edit. In fact, Todd Browning, the director of Freaks and Dracula, saw his career get destroyed by public outrage during this period. In the 40s and 50s, horror came into its own in Britain. Hammer Film Productions, a production house known for its Gothic horror cinema, flourished during the 40s and 50s. This period also became known for cinema that was a product of its times, with the genre becoming more concerned with the effects of war on people. The supernatural antagonist was often replaced by things like radioactive mutation in films such as The Incredible Shrinking Man. The other thing that concerned filmmakers during this period was the fear of invasion. This led to the development of another genre of cinema that started as a product of horror and later came to be known as the disaster movie genre, which in turn became what we know today as apocalypse or dystopian cinema. In many ways, the genre that The Hunger Games and the very popular show The Last of Us belong to was born within horror cinema during the Second World War. The period between the 50s and 60s saw the prevalence of low-budget slasher films and the rise of zombies. George A. Romero pioneered this kind of cinema by producing Night of the Living Dead. The period after this, through the 70s and 80s, saw the rise of the occult, with films focusing on people getting possessed by the devil. Horror as a genre went back to its origins in the supernatural during this period. The 2 milestones of horror cinema in this period were The Exorcist and The Omen. In fact, horror cinema went back to literature at this time. Stephen King's works became the source for many films during this period. Carrie, The Shining, and Poltergeist were widely watched at this time. After this was the rise of horror slasher films. Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street were some of the most prominent films of this period. What makes horror so enticing? Is there a reason why we continue to engage with this genre, even though it leads to negative emotions such as fear within its audiences. The reason why horror works goes right back to an idea that Aristotle articulates in the Poetics. This is the idea of catharsis, which is a release of emotions, usually negative, as a result of witnessing art. This release was considered important for smooth functioning of society. This, in some ways, is backed by scientific research that examines people's physiological response to the genre. According to research by Concordia University, horror entertainment can trigger fight-or-flight response, which comes with a boost in adrenaline, endorphins, and dopamine while viewers are in a safe space. The brain can process the surroundings and conclude that the experience was not a true threat. Sociologist Margie Kerr says that after the physical reactions associated with fear wear off, faster heart rate and breathing, muscle tension, and other involuntary responses, they are replaced with intense relief. Positive feelings intensify, and short fear floods our brain with feel-good chemicals. Horror has always been a popular genre that serves an important purpose within society and can be very important physiologically. What are your favorite horror films? Write in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel so that I may continue creating more interesting content for you. I'll see you very soon with another interesting video. Till then, take care.